Greetings folks and welcome to Bob of All Trades. This is a fabulous update on the Electronics Mag 15. I reviewed this laptop 10 months ago and it was in my possession prior to that review being released for 6 weeks while I worked behind the scenes with electronics, setting private videos out to Intel, trying to make this thing the best as it possibly could be for the consumer because I can. It's just something that I do. Now when it comes to other reviews, Dave 2D posted his review on this machine 11 months ago and as of today has almost 2 million views. If that gives you any idea how important of a laptop this was to the laptop community when it had released. And since then, it has undergone a great deal of abuse from me. My son has used this. Within the last 10 or 11 months, there's probably been maybe 500 hours of gaming. At least, maybe a little bit more. My son plays on this almost every single day. It's been fantastic, basically flawless. But with the most recent BIOS update, that is what I want to bring to your attention because, you know, I've used laptops. Obviously, I live the laptop life, and very rarely does a BIOS update come along, especially 10, 11, 12 months down the road on your product that does anything to enhance the quality of life for the consumer. If you're lucky, it does absolutely nothing. Sometimes it takes things away. From the factory, this had an undervolt on the 9750H of a 50 millivolt undervolt. Now, you were unable to access this in the BIOS. You had to use third-party software in order to increase that undervolt, but at least it came with a little bit of a factory tune. Fast forward to July 30th, 2020, this BIOS is accessible on their page, link in the description below. You can now undervolt in the BIOS. Now I have this set to negative 0.125. You can push further, but only if your CPU is stable. So please test this with third-party software first before locking something in to the BIOS here so you don't brick your machine. On top of that, you can now undervolt the integrated graphics. I don't think I've ever seen a laptop that was capable of doing that. Very cool. Now there's a whole lot more to this and I'm going to share it with you. But let's talk about something very important here. Whether you knew this or not, this is a laptop that was made in collaboration with Intel. And this is Intel's BIOS on this machine. Yet we are able to undervolt. Please understand something here. Yes, we know the plundervolt mitigations. It is really not Intel that's pushing that onto the consumers. It's up to the individuals, the manufacturers who make these laptops. It's up to them and their BIOS team if they want to forward that and patch that into their BIOS updates in firmware, therefore disabling the undervolt here. Okay, so maybe Intel's not the bad guy as we can still get that on a laptop that was made in collab with Intel and it's their BIOS. Do you see what I'm saying here? So just a little heads up, things may not be always what they seem. Now, not only can we do the iGPU offset, the CPU offset, all within the BIOS, but we can also change the power modes between performance, balance, and battery saver, which is where we're at right now. Now, you can, of course, do this in the software and within the Windows user interface, but it can also be done on a BIOS level. Pretty cool. The minimum fan duty cycle was, I believe, at 30%, and we can now dial that back to 25%. I know it's not a whole lot, but being able to do that and combine with changing the passive cooling, we can enable that or disable that. Means we can get pretty nice idle acoustics out of this machine. Many people were talking about maybe it ramping up and down a whole lot, and it's just whisper quiet. And I have been testing this out heavily all day today, and it's just been really nice from an idling standpoint. I can definitely confirm an improvement there. So again, all adjustable in the BIOS. Speed shift can now be enabled or disabled in the BIOS, which is really cool. And something that I was not expecting, but the CEO of electronics had been pushing for this hard since day one, was the ability to limit the charge on the battery, okay? And so instead of just plugging in your power supply and having it constantly put a charge on the battery, if you could bring that down to, let's say, 90%, you could prolong the life of the battery. And I'm proud to announce that and can confirm that you can do this within the latest Control Center software, in which you want to make sure that you have the BIOS combined with the Control Center software. Please don't try to run one or the other because there's going to be some buggy issues and a hot mess there. So So make sure you run them both and not one or the other. There's also a firmware update on the trackpad that's supposed to improve the quality of life there. I had no complaints on this Windows Precision Glass touchpad, but nonetheless, still a firmware update on that, which is really cool. What a great laptop. And those that are in the know about this machine, then they know that the GPU on this had a thermal throttle limitation of 75 degrees Celsius compared to the factory NVIDIA spec of 87 degrees Celsius. And we were able to bypass this using the Asus GPU Tweak software. And I can confirm that when you enable benchmark mode, which opens up the power limits as well as maxes out the fans, within this mode, you can still use Asus GPU Tweak to bypass the thermal throttle limitations, and then you could push this all the way up to 86, 87 degrees Celsius for more performance. And that's something that I personally would recommend. It's not going to hurt the machine. It's very, very overbuilt, okay? And the 1660 Ti in here is the most powerful one that you can get inside of a laptop. Most of them are 80 or 90 watts. This one's 115 watts, which is 5 watts shy of the desktop variant. So very powerful graphics card and kind of unmatched for a 1660 Ti. There's also a 2070 Max-Q that also features Electro Boost, so it will run at, I believe, 80 watts and then boost up to 115 watts. And all of that, again, is intact with this latest BIOS. So just rest assured that however your Mag is performing now with this update, it's just going to give you some quality of life features that I think all of you should appreciate without compromising some of the tuning capabilities that I had revealed in my review. The only downside, and there really isn't one, is that you can't roll back to a previous BIOS once this one is installed. And after all of my testing, I see no reason why anyone would ever want to. Those are just my thoughts and opinions, but again, I really don't see why anyone would want to back off of this BIOS once they have it installed in their machine, considering we can still bypass the GPU limitations and we get all these great features within the BIOS, and now I can ditch the third-party software such as throttle stop and just do everything that I want to do within the BIOS, which means just better stability and consistency, and being able to adjust these things in the BIOS is always going to be better than doing so in third-party software. That's not an opinion, that's just a fact. So kudos to Electronics. I mean, how many manufacturers out there, 10 months old laptop, get this sort of treatment? So you just don't see that happen very often. So, I mean, round of applause, Will. Again, great job. Thanks for pushing to make this thing a great machine. You didn't have to do this, and I look forward to seeing what other kind of updates you have on some of your current platforms that you have out there for the consumer. So great job. That's going to do it, folks. That was my update on the Mag 15. Check the reviews linked in the description below and here. I'm Bob of All Trades, and I'll see you in the next video.